Welcome to another episode of The Consulting Curve, the community approach to clients and consulting. Brought to you each week by BizDrivers.biz, founded by Peter Selby, a trusted profit and growth advisory to companies and consultants around the world. Tune in each week and learn how you can take that journey from corporate to consulting. Welcome to another episode of Consultancy Curve with Peter Selby. Peter, thanks for joining us once again.
Oh, hey, happy to be here. Looking forward to today's discussion.
Hey, I'm looking forward to another episode. I wanted to just touch on just to give a brief background on Consultancy Curve, the community approach to clients and consulting. And every couple of weeks, we want to launch another episode and just have Peter kind of explain what does it look like advising in the new economy and kind of all the facets and issues around that, and primarily in the consultancy space. And Peter, the first episode we talked about was just kind of laying the foundation for advising in the new economy. We touched on, just how many companies out there are that actually need assistance, and that there are more consultants than ever before out there. It's this kind of the great resignation has caused this boon in LinkedIn for consultants, and have the very low barrier of entry, and LinkedIn has really played a part in that. But companies are requiring much deeper and better insights. And this is one thing that we really want to touch on. How can consultants, how can advisors step into that space, and really just how can they meet consumer and client expectations and have really good solutions? But this week we're going to drill down a little bit and kind of really start talking about some of the drivers behind advising in the new economy. And for the next 3 episodes, we really want to focus on kind of the sales conversion drivers. But this week, we're really talking about just this whole idea of being kind of a lone wolf versus being attached to an advising company. So Peter, as we laid that groundwork, take it away, buddy.
Hey, there's nothing left for me. Keep going. You're doing fine. Look, I agree. I mean, the whole purpose of really running this series is the learning curve around consulting, the consulting curve that people go up, and it's changed so dramatically. Well, it's been changing, I guess, as the world becomes connected, as Industrial 4.0 takes shape. It's changed the consulting space generally, but of course, COVID's kind of accelerated that, and there really are a lot of elements to it. So when we talk about sales conversion drivers over the next few episodes, we've picked that because out of all the people we help, and we have a section of the business set up just to do this because it's so difficult for people. Converting sales is one of the bigger challenges that people face. It's probably the 80-20 rule in play again. Percent of people that we assist start with a problem around being able to close out opportunities. So if we think about that, and today we're talking about company brand, and what's really interesting is it's probably, in the corporate space, it's well understood. In the consulting space, outside of the major consulting houses that sort of work in that blue chip Fortune 500 space, the importance of having a company brand is underestimated. And the great resignation that you mentioned before, and the low barrier of entry due to LinkedIn and other tools like it, means there are a lot more independent consultants than ever before. And interestingly, through COVID, when times got very tough, one of the things that the large consulting houses did is lay off hundreds of people. And guess what they did? They went straight onto LinkedIn and set up as an independent consultant. So a lot of competition in that space. However, there is a balance between being a very large consulting organization that is clearly going to be a reasonable investment to get help with, through to maybe a more cost-effective approach of an independent consultant. There's a perceived risk that goes with that. So that, the larger the consulting organization, the less perceived risk with the engagement of that. So lone wolves can be seen as very high risk in the market. And the problem with that is it really limits consultants' to the amount of companies that they're going to do business with. It does tend to push people towards the smaller sized companies, or pushes people into where they have deep networks and they know people, and they're a known entity. As soon as you step outside that, it's seen as a bit high risk.
Let me ask you real quick, when you talk about these consultants that maybe were in these major consultancy firms before and they were laid off, is it true that the larger the company, that maybe the more specialized they were as well, that they were a little bit less of a generalist, and they're going to have a much more difficult time, speaking to maybe SMEs on a more general basis?
There is an element of that, definitely. I mean, one of the things that the larger consulting houses will have very niche resources for sure. And if you happen to be one of them, you are going to struggle on your own, there's no doubt. But there's also generalists as well. But interestingly, that name, if you've done work for, Boston Consulting or somebody, it's a reputable company. It's well understood. Because you have worked for them but are now independent, that trust that comes with that doesn't carry across to you anymore.
Yeah.
And you're just instantly seen as somebody surrounded by very limited resource. So there's two problems. There is the scope of companies that will actually do business with you, and there is also a limit to the type of work you will get if you do get engaged, and assignments tend to be a lot shorter or a lot smaller as a result, or can be. I mean, I'm talking generally here, of course. There's exceptions to all of this, and obviously very niche resource is an exception to that, but generally speaking, that's the pattern that it follows. But the point you make about a singular skill set is also one of the key issues that companies or potential customers see in a lone wolf independent consultant. They, generally speaking, don't have a lot of process around them. So, a lot of IP, a lot of customer solutions. So therefore, they're seen as companies are seen as having a wider skill set of delivery. And people do get pigeonholed into, well, he's very good at this, and so when we want this, we'll go get someone else, and that's becoming a bigger problem for the independents, because more and more companies are looking for end-to-end solutions, right?
Right.
They don't go to 5 different consultants to solve a problem. They want to go to one. So again, this is something that works against people in the market.
Is it an advantage to have those resources in-house versus, say, an independent having to contract out to either other work colleagues that might have specializations in those fields? Is it better to have those, as you would say, in the building with you?
I guess there's two opposing views to that. So one is, if you have those resources in-house, you have to feed them, and therefore that requires a certain amount of volume.
Right.
If you it's a lot more flexible. I think the commercial arrangements between the company and the people in the company aren't that important, and normally quite invisible to the client, to be fair. But having control of those resources and be seen to be able to have the processes around that is critical. So where we see, and this is a common problem, where we see people working in a sole environment, is they tend to have one offering with a fixed network of either people they know or companies that will be willing to use them. And if they do need to call in others, they're seen as having to call in others. And if there's a customer that knows that there's an issue that's this wide, and the particular person they know has a skill set this wide, and they know they're going to have to go find resource, they're more likely to go to a company that already has seen as having that resource.
Right. So we've talked about kind of the consultant seen maybe high risk, being a lone wolf. We've talked a little bit about, maybe a limited skill set or limited resources, that is that lone wolf is bringing to the table. What else is around this space when we're talking about sales conversion drivers, or specifically related to company brand?
Sure. If you think of the proprietary systems that come with a company, so normally an organized company has invested in some proprietary systems to help, methodologies or whatever it may be, tools, technology, whatever it may be, to help drive an outcome in a particular area from their experience of doing that. And with that, and that enables the company to differentiate. It's much, much harder for an individual to differentiate, especially in a crowd the size it is today. I suspect there's another 100,000 people signed up on LinkedIn this morning, around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the Great Resignation really is underestimated. It's incredible what's going on at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that independent space is getting very, very, very crowded. So what are you going to do as an individual that's going to be very, very different? It's quite difficult if you haven't had the time to invest in the proprietary systems, the solutions, the technology, or find the partners that you develop over time to do that. So it is a lot more difficult. Having said all this, I'm not saying it's impossible to operate as an independent. It definitely, there's plenty of people doing it, but it is getting a lot harder than it was. And there's a lot more pressure to deliver deeper outcomes. And, the very lucrative sort of work is often evasive from a lone operator.
You talked to, maybe you and I were just talking off camera one day. We were talking about when you look at an advisor or consultant and when they are looking at their personal network, that you quickly like exhaust that network. And so is there an advantage to having a company, community around that would kind of broaden that? And I think we're going to maybe drill down a little more on that later in the podcast, but it seems like it has some application here when you're converting, the sales conversion process too. It's just, going through your, quote, digital Rolodex there. Yeah. I just dated myself there.
Yeah. But look, yes. I mean, the short answer is yes. And if you think about the warm network and the whole thing around that, and yes, we will talk in more depth because it's so critical. But, people are always surprised by how quickly they deplete their known networks, especially people that have been employed for a major part of their lives and are just moving into the advisory space, corporate careers and such like, which is where we really get involved with people quite a lot, helping them. And the simple rule for that is, there's a very famous book, a guy called Perry Marshall wrote, The 80-20 of Marketing. And what he talked about there is the law of Pareto that's in everything around us, applies to marketing just like it does everything else. And if you think of your network, say there's 100 people in your network, that would be a small network, I know, but let's keep the math simple for me at least. Then 20 people are only ever likely to do business with you out of that 100 people. So if you've got a network of 1,000 people, you're down to 100. And of course, in that 100 people, they're not all going to want services right now. So, you run out of network very quickly. So let's think of a company just on maths alone. Okay. If everybody, if you have a personal network of 1,000 people, but you're in a company of 10 people, you've now got 10,000 people in a trusted network. So just on numbers, it's a lot easier to drive sales conversion in a company or a collection of people than it is a singular. And we do see independents forming associations and things to try and get around that exact problem that their networks are too small. The other common problem with that is people then try and sell what is a solution that's very highly based on trust into a network where nobody knows them. Yeah. It's just about impossible without a sales team, it's quite an ineffective way. So you've actually got to somehow find a way to grow that warm network. And we'll talk a lot more about that. It's absolutely critical. And the other side of that coin, there's more people in a company, there's more resources. So there's more resources also to deliver. And therefore, the more lucrative and more attractive work assignments naturally go to companies than individuals because there is the resources to deliver them. I mean, a major assignment might take 3 or 4 people to deliver it over a number of months. Mm-hmm. So you know, a lone wolf would never be in the frame for that work. They can just never get the chance to position for it in the first place. So, you know, those resources help from both a selling perspective as well as a delivery perspective. But of course, from the potential client's perspective, having those resources gives them a lot more comfort and reduces that risk level. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's, I mean, as you were talking, I'm thinking, okay, this is like a chicken and the egg thing. So it's like, you know, you increase conversion, you increase business, you increase retention, you increase, you know, just, I guess, how pleased you are in the role and just job satisfaction. And it's like it's a cyclical model that the more that works, the more everything grows, you know, in that entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and look, that ecosystem is very important. Another thing that we see quite frequently is people are very cognizant of the fact that trading under their name really limits what they can do. So they'll start a company, but it's quite obvious at a short glance that that company is a company of one.
Yep.
So the company name itself won't do it for you.
Yep.
There needs to be some substance behind that company, and the client needs to be able to see that substance. It's very important. Now, you know, there's a whole range of independent companies, and they range from, you know, 5 consultants to a couple of hundred, and then you start to get into the large consulting houses. But any of those companies, you know, the size isn't as critical as the fact that it's seen to have some substance. There are some systems and processes that can be demonstrated. There are people that can sit in front of a customer and talk their language about a particular issue. That's, you know, that's where you unlock a far more consistent amount of opportunities and a wider range of work in the process.
I mean, what a way to kind of wrap us up today as we're kind of looked at just the benefit of, you know, consultants of advisors being part of a company, to being able to brand themselves along with the larger brand of a consultancy firm. And I'm so tempted to kind of jump into the future episodes because I'm kind of looking and seeing all these connections of the things we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes. And we just want to whet their appetite for the episode that's going to drop in a couple of weeks. But Peter, is there anything that you just want to wrap us up with right now with just kind of the whole space around the company brand and the advisor space? And we can just close out with this thought.
Yeah, sure. Look, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to sit here and put people off being independent consultants. So it's really important. There's a lot of independent consultants out there, and a lot of them are very successful, and they certainly get often the life balance they're looking for. I'm really just pointing out some of the challenges that we've come across through helping people and seeing what a difference a company brand can make. But it is not the only thing that'll work out there, but it certainly lowers a lot of those hurdles. And I think the other thing to remember is in this faster environment, this data-driven environment, because there's more change and things are more turbulent than they used to be, customers have become more risk averse. So it's a higher priority than it used to be. Customers used to be prepared to take a little bit of risk. They're far more reluctant to do that. But there is the balance between, you know, zero risk in a giant consulting company and a big bill versus a smaller company and a smaller bill, but a little bit more risk versus a lower cost again and higher risk of an individual. And it's finding that balance. And certainly that middle ground seems to be where people are moving to.
Well, next episode, we're going to kind of drill down a little more into just really kind of closing the deal, you know, around sales closure and the code that involved in that entire mathematical formula that you're going to unpack for us. But Peter, thanks again, man, for just taking time today and just talking about the consultancy curve, the community approach to clients and consulting.
No, great. Really enjoyed the topic, and you know, it's so good to be able to sit here and talk and give some substance for people to be able to follow when they're thinking about doing this stuff.
For sure. Hey, see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thanks very much. See you next time.